Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, September the 16th, 2024. We have a couple of items on our agenda this evening. The first one being the Middle Big Creek Phase 2 improvement financing that I kind of warned you about would be presented to us in the near future, and here we are. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. As the council will remember, some time ago, Mr. Shook came to us, and Mr. Shook, Executive Director for Middle Big Creek,
Little Blue Valley.
Little Blue Valley, had come to us as one of the trustee groups that's in that group, asking for authorization from the council, as they have to do from each of the groups, for a bond issue for improvements to be done at the Middle Big Creek substation. There have been changes to that original presentation, and Mr. Shook is here tonight to talk about that and its impacts. And so with that, I'll be turning it over to Mr. Shook.
Thank you. So Mr. Fearborn's correct. I have seen many of you before. In 2020, the Little Blue Valley Sewer District is a larger district, and that serves everything, portions of Raymore headed north, with a larger plant up by the Missouri River. But then we also have a sub-district down in the city of Pleasant Hill that serves the eastern side of Raymore, as well as parts of South Lee Summit, Greenwood, Pleasant Hill, Lake Winnebago, a couple sewer districts, Dykeland and Molendyke. And so in 2020, the plant was nearing capacity, and so we convened a study with an engineering consultant. We involved the members of the sub-district of the Middle Big Creek folks or communities, and sought input about the future, their future growth and so forth. And that study resulted in a report being generated in 2021 that identified some project scope and budget for that scope. For the growth, to meet future regulations and to replace some aging equipment. And so you saw me back in 2021 to seek authorization for financing for that work. That work included an expansion of that plant in Pleasant Hill from 2.25 million gallons a day to 7.5 million gallons a day. As I said, we have to construct some new facilities because there's some new regulations associated with nutrients from our discharge. There's also construction of some solids treatment facilities there. Currently, what's done is that the solids that are removed at that wastewater plant are hauled and put into the Little Blue Valley Sewer District system, and the sub-district pays for that. The sub-district is a standalone cost center and the revenues for the sub-district are secured only from charges related to portions of our cities that send flow to it. But when they haul solids to Little Blue, or when they have excess flow and they need to pump it over the ridge, Little Blue charges them as a customer, much the same as they charge all the other customers. And so, so by putting the solids treatment down at Pleasant Hill, there's some efficiencies to be gained and ultimately some savings to be gained. And then we also plan to construct meters, because currently the sub-district bills its customers based on the number of connections. The customer cities report to us how many connections they have that send flow to the Middle Big Creek sub-district, and we have a fixed rate times those connections, and that's what we bill them monthly. Currently, that rate is $44. As a part of the previous authorization, we gave a rate plan, and so starting October 1st, we'll be moving to $49 per connection. That's been a fair and manageable system. However, it may not be seen as equitable because if one customer has a certain number of connections, but they have a lot of excess flow that they're sending to the plant, they're having a greater impact on the plant than maybe someone who doesn't. And so it's more appropriate, at least based on conversations with the members of the communities we serve, as well as our consultants and so forth, that we switch to a flow-based system. And so installation of meters is also a part of this project. So as I said, we completed that study in 2020. We got a budget. That budget was estimated to be $106 million. And we went to all the customers in the Middle Big Creek Subdistrict, this board included, and we received unanimous approval to proceed with the issuance of that debt. What has happened since then is we've started design, we completed design, but in the process of working on the design of those facilities, we encountered a situation where FEMA was adjusting the floodplain mapping for the area where the treatment plant is. That caused the floodplain to be expanded and subsequently encroach upon our areas that we intended to do construction. It didn't stop the project, it just required us to do some additional study and analysis. It took about 1.5 years and delayed the project about 1.5 years to complete that study. We completed it, all is well. There's some minor regrading that we're doing, but the whole project is going to be able to proceed accordingly. However, that 1.5 year delay has resulted, much as you guys probably know, the price of goods has increased significantly over that 1.5 years. We did not get to construction, and so the price of equipment, the price of concrete, price of labor has all gone up significantly since then. And so our most recent cost estimate done this year indicates that project is now a $116 million project. What we are asking our customer cities right now is to authorize us an additional $12 million of debt issuance. Added to the 106, that would be 118. We do not intend to borrow 118 if bids do indeed come in at 116 as our engineer's estimate right now. But it's a process to go to each customer city and seek that authorization. So we've included an additional $2 million on that authorization this time. Things that drove that, I talked about the delay. There's just a point of, so construction materials, equipment, machinery, and labor have all increased, ranging from 15% to 30% just in the last 2 years. And so that was unforeseen. The engineer did try to incorporate a traditional escalation of costs in their original estimate, knowing the project is a multi-year project. However, that 1.5 year delay was something that was not foreseen. And so I'm sure what that means, or what that cost factor really brings to mind is, okay, how does that affect us? And so I've included some rate information in the package you have. And I'm sorry I haven't been advancing the slides, but so if you look at the screen above, the yellow line represents the blue line represents what was developed as a part of the original estimate. The reason why it escalated at a greater rate than what we're proposing today is the financing mechanism we've sought from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources to receive state revolving funds. That's basically a subsidy on the interest for that loan, and it's a lower interest loan. They've also agreed to allow us to finance it rather than 20 years, 30 years. And then furthermore, they've also agreed to not escalate the payments until after a current debt issuance that the subdistrict already has is completely paid off. And so rather than having to make double payments initially, we'll basically essentially be paying interest until 2033, when the prior debt issuance is paid off. And so what that enables us is, rather than go to $49 starting in October, if we were able to get authorization from our customer entities, we will only increase to $47, and then subsequently $49 and $52. Now, I did say we're going to transition to flow-based billing, and so what you see on this trend is only representative. As you see there in the note at the bottom, come 2027 is our full intention to bill based on flow. So these per connection charges, again, are only representative of what we estimate based on the current number of connections and the projected growth that we receive from our customer cities. Quite frankly, come 2027, if someone has a lot of extra flow, they would probably see an average cost greater than that number up there. If someone has less flow than and as far as a percentage, compared to the percentage of connections they have, then they would probably see a lesser number than that up there. And so if you turn the next page, this is our best information related to flow. It's a little busy, but early in the project, we did some flow metering in June, July, and August of 21. And we measured flows coming from our customer entities. You can see during that time period of the total flow that was received, Raymore was 12% of it. Now, if you look at a connection base, right now Raymore is 14.2% of the total connections. And so that's just gives you an idea of what it would be like if you're one of those customers that has less flow than you do connections. I'm not going to say those 3 months are exactly representative. I'll also be honest with you and say that when a storm comes through, it rains harder on some cities than it does others, and we get extra flow from some cities, and we get less flow or even none from other cities because the storm just didn't track that way. And so, yes, sir.
Again, not being an engineer, and you don't have to get super detailed, but is the flow measured like as a city as a whole, or is it measured like in Raymore per household? So when we go to bill based on flow, how's that work?
As Jeff has said, currently, flow has nothing to do with it for Middle Big Creek. For what we're looking at here, it's a per connection charge. And where one of the things that we see on here is, of course, until the cutoff of actually going to flow from per connection, going along with this for the next 3 years actually saves us money on the per connection charge. You'll remember that when we presented the budget, we had the 49. This would actually roll our budget back to a 47. But once we go to the flow, each entity is then metered for what they are sending there. You may remember during the budget presentation, we talked about our I&I program actually now shifting out to the east side of the city because we want our flow in those high rain events to be reduced the same way we've been able to effectively reduce it here in the core of the city. Now we need, before we go to the flow method, we want to actually be reducing the I&I even more. But because of what everybody is currently estimated to be sending there, where we on the per connection are the 14.2 of the total that Middle Big Creek would be getting, strictly based on the estimate, and not everybody has seen this, we would actually be going from 14.2 of the total down to 12% of the total. So when we go to the flow, and we'd like to drive that down even more with our I&I program, which we know is in advance of some of the other locations that actually take advantage of this. Short answer to yours is they're putting up a number of meters so that they can figure out from each entity what is actually going in there.
I would also say that every one of those customers up there, they have a different system. And so though I may be currently charging $44 a connection to everybody, some of them take that 44 and they add a certain amount on top. Like I know one customer that they don't have water meters, and so they just add, I think it's $10 on top of that or $15 on top of that. Well, they don't have the ability to use water consumption to generate bills to their customers. And so whereas Lee Summit or someone else, like Raymore, you have two sewer treatment. You have Middle Big Creek and you have Little Blue. And so all those costs are pulled together by your utility to identify what your total cost is, and then you allocate it to the homes after that. So, go ahead. Is that it? Thank you. Okay. The one thing I would also say is we're not going to put a meter in and say, this is what you gave me last month. You owe me this much. Because from 1 month to the next, sometimes that's even triple. You might have a lot of rain and a lot of flow, and nobody's budget can handle that. And so what we do at Little Blue and our intentions for the Middle Big Creek Subdistrict is to do an averaging effect. So we do the metering constantly, but then we would actually develop a bill for the year based on the last 3 years, 5 years of average data. And so our intentions, again, in 2027 is to bill by flow, but our intentions are to have the meters in 2025 so that we have 2 years of metering so we can tell your staff, hey, you guys are running a little high. You might want to focus some, it sounds like you're already doing it, but you might, maybe we'll tell another customer city that's not already doing it, you might want to focus your money right now before we start charging you to try to figure out where this extra flow's coming, because when come 2027, that's going to hurt. And so we believe that one of the things we did try to do to try to address the escalation of cost before coming to you is that we got with our engineer, and I did flip past that page, but there's a page of different things that we looked at to try to remove from the project. It looks kind of like this, I'll back up the slides too, but
On page 7.
we looked at nearly 20 things that can we eliminate or can we reduce the scope of the project? Because coming back and asking for more was not our preferred choice. What the note there at the bottom says is even if we could have implemented all 19 of those things, we were still going to fall $2 million short. So we would have had to seek additional authorization anyway. And I would say that I couldn't eliminate all 19 of those things because the intentions of the project would not be met. We would not be able to do the nutrient treatment or having the equipment for the future nutrient treatment. So we would be coming back again in the future. And really the economy of scale to do it all at once is here, and we need to do it now. And so I just want to make sure you don't think that let's just go ask them for more money. That's really not the approach. This was a last resort. But I do think the project is still warranted. I think it's essential because we are at capacity today. And I don't want to be in the position where I can't meet the needs of our customers. And so I need to be able to expand this plant and move forward. And that's all I was going to say, subject to any questions you might have. Oh, well, let me back up. So where we're at today is we are presenting this to the customers. The sub-district has the ability to issue debt by state statute if 75% of our customer entities, governing bodies, approve this resolution. Currently, we've presented to 2, and they've both approved it. I have the others on the calendar. And the 2 that are approved, Pleasant Hill and Mullendike at this point. So our intentions are to continue to meet, seek those authorizations, and as soon as we do, we would proceed. We're hoping to bid the project come November and start construction early next year.
And this just takes a vote of the council, not the resident.
That is correct, sir. And we do intend to have this particular resolution in front of you all next Monday night.
Would you like me to explain that a little bit? There's been people who had concern about that in the past. We don't have visibility on who sends flow to the sub-district. We are a wholesale entity. We serve the city of Raymore. So I couldn't tell you what homes this would directly impact or not. And most cities create a blended rate anyway. And so it's appropriate because we're a cost to your utility that it would be the governing body of that utility would vote for it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. As is customary, when we have the budget before us, it's another work session to include the 2025 budget and CIP, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
At the first meeting, when the budget was presented, as we always kind of indicate, it is for presentation purposes, question purposes, kind of let the budget flow over you. And then we begin with this first work session. Thank you. We begin with this first work session simply inviting the council for any discussion. Normally, in the past, that discussion has centered on available fund balance because we remind the council during the budget presentation that there is available fund balance in each of the 3 operating funds. We also remind the council that that available fund balance, we caution the council that it should only be spent on one-time equipment or small projects. The capital funds are obviously they're for the larger projects that have been proposed to you all in the CIP. Normally, tonight tends to center on either questions or asking staff for any recommendations that we might have relative to one-time purchases. A lot of times, the staff's items are based on discussion that we have had with individual council members, kind of questions that they have asked us where we're kind of seeing direction. So with that, sir, if the council has any questions on the budget that was presented, and then we do have one overriding available fund balance that I would like to discuss with the council tonight at your convenience.
Could you remind us again what the available fund balance is?
Right up here, sir.
Oh, okay, great. And from the different funds? Okay.
So again, the general fund, we had the available fund balance, which you can see on the summary page for that. And again, available fund balance is the fund balance that is there at the council's discretion after we have set aside what is required by ordinance, a 20% reserve balance, restricted reserve balance against the expenses that are projected for that year.
Okay. I would open it up for discussion at this time, as we normally do, for these particular issues. Yeah, Ms. Abdel, go ahead.
Can we start with anything that's been requested from other departments that hasn't been funded?
Thank you, ma'am. If we could start with my council discussion, not to be selfish. I had, the council had a very serious conversation on when the use tax didn't pass, what we're going to do about 58 Highway, what we're going to do about transportation issues in general. And because we are now past the landfill crisis, where the council was wisely setting aside all available fund balance for any costs that might be associated with that, we do have more flexibility with the $1,739,000. Obviously, a huge infrastructure issue for the city of Raymore every year is our streets and our curbs. It's an ongoing, never-ending issue. And I had suggested to the council at the time that moving forward, not necessarily formally, but it might be wise for the council to consider setting aside 35 every year, a starting point of 35% of available fund balance to be added to the street preservation amount, which is over $1 million. But in this case, as you can see here, 35% on top of that would be an additional $608,801 that staff would recommend as a starting point going into street preservation. That would bring the available fund balance in the general fund down to well, I have to get to some other items before I give you that number. Sorry about that. But 608,801 right off of the top of that 1,739,000 would be our first recommendation. Other items, yes.
Sorry, quick question. So for streets or curbs or split 50-50?
The actual program itself to be determined, just like with the budget, we put it all in there. And again, obviously doesn't use all of the available fund balance. We could actually go up from there, down from there when we actually get to a program that we're recommending to the council, because again, the program itself is in flux as to whether or not we're going to get to a point where we're recommending the 2 years for 58 Highway only and everything else sets aside, which the 608 could perhaps go to a mix of critical issue curbs and street at the residential level while we're doing the 58, then repeat that again next year. A lot of options for the council to consider. Right now, we're simply asking the council for the funding associated with that based on an earlier conversation.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so that 35%, wouldn't have to spend that in this budget year if we decided we were gonna earmark something like changes in the lanes in 58 Highway, we could start putting together money for that? Are you thinking about that would be spent in the budget year?
The same way we spend street preservation to the degree possible, if we bring the plan to you, let's say that we bring a plan to you that is the 1,000,001 in street pres, along with the curb program at $800,000, and we add 600,000 to that, the program we would be bringing to you would be for the entire amount. Like in any given year, and now as that number has crept up, they can't always get to that in a single fiscal year, but the program carries over. It may be that we have to do X, Y, and Z in the spring of the following year, or we can accelerate it a little bit. But the intent would be budgeted amount for the year, spent amount for the year. Three other items in the general fund, because that would come out of the general fund available fund balance. Three other items that have been proposed since then. A solar weather camera for the streets department. This is a camera that will allow us to see we divide the city into zones. And with the way storms come in now, especially since they have rolled over to being more icing conditions than snow conditions, it seems in this day and age, but even with snow, this will allow us to delineate between the zones and see other areas of the city in great detail as far as where we need to be applying material and/or applying manpower to, so we can better prioritize on the fly. Total for the advanced solar weather camera, $2,685. We have a very advanced police department drone, and it has a lot of items on it that are kind of critical if we're needing to deploy it for the police department. It's heat seeking, night vision, all of that. We use it a lot for non-police department related items. And so in speaking with one of the council members and having some background on some things and seeing some really good pictures that have come forward, we would propose a general drone to be used by our GIS department, our communications department in doing advertisings, our streets department in checking conditions, couple at the parks department, especially for events and advertising. The two elements to that. I feel it is a misuse because the police department drone, when we deploy it, we have to have police department personnel out deploying it. So I feel like it's not a good idea to have one officer and one command staff person out there helping us with a parks event to take pictures of things. They have better use of their time, more important use of their time than just taking, not that it's not important in the general fund, but if there's an emergency or whatever, the reverse also being true. If they're out there with something deployed and an emergency happens, I don't want to delay getting the drone deployed if we have a lost child someplace that we're looking for, and we got to tear it down in one location, get it up in another. The drone total cost, with a couple of bells and whistles, we don't need night vision and we don't need heat seeking on the general drone, would be $3,020. And we have actually already kind of done the background on the training that would go on, who'd be doing the training, who'd be on that team. I think it would be a very effective tool in a number of areas for us, especially as we advance our GIS issues. An advanced traffic counting piece of equipment, we have, we used to use what we call turtles, that they were little patches about this size that actually got mounted to the asphalt, and it would give us traffic counts only. Those have both gone out of style, and we've definitely used up their useful life here in the city of Raymore. we would propose a more advanced item. The new ones would not only do traffic counts, but they can actually do classification of vehicle that's going over, size of vehicle that's going over. They give us speed data. They give us vehicle gap. They do a lot more. We would be proposing 2 of those for a total cost of $9,169. The final item that we would be proposing is a. This is where I need to stop you. This number was inaccurate. Thank you very much. Thank you. The final item that we would be proposing is a backhoe loader for the enterprise fund. 99% of what we would be using this for is when we're digging up for sewer pipe, digging up for water pipe, so it can appropriately be coming out of the enterprise fund from an audit and accounting standpoint. Total cost on that is $109,446, which is what we would be asking for. The reason we'd be asking for this is we currently have one. It's a John Deere. It has definitely used up its useful life. We have had a couple of $20,000 repairs over the course of the last 36 to 48 months, one just in the last 12 months. Right now, it's kind of in that really bad shape, but we estimate that we could probably get some trade-in value of it. Maybe as high as $30,000, but that's an unknown. That would have come off of the 109, but not, because that's an unknown, we'd be asking for the total price of it. Again, we do have enough available fund balance. We obviously don't have $2,183,000, but we do have enough available fund balance to bear that. Those are the only staff items that have come to me for one-time pieces of equipment. No projects, small projects have come to me at this time. The one item, which was actually the only item that was brought up at city council level when we presented the budget and got to this, was the possibility of cameras, additional cameras for the parks. Council may remember that conversation. Mr. Mustine, do you need anything? We're working on that. As we started delving into it, a much more extensive issue than we thought it was going to be. Clearly, we don't have the money in the Parks Fund here to be spending on anything at this point with available fund balance, because that amount is very, very low. It's usually about this point that somebody on the council asks me, what's your comfort level for money left over? And I've gotten really good at dodging the question. However, getting a little bit more flexible with it now that we are past the crisis. My comfort level in the general fund to be left after everything is proposed would be in the $600,000 range. That seems high. The reason is we have a couple of significant unknowns. I've talked to the council about these. We have no idea what the impact, we tried to account for it, but we have no idea what the impact of the senior tax credit is going to be on that particular source of revenue until we go through it one time. So if we end up with $150,000 or a $200,000 swing to what we think we've built into that, then we're going to have a problem, which is why I could get down to the 500 to the 400 range usually in there, but that worries me a little bit, that we need to see exactly what the impact of that is going to be for us. Considering that, with the items I presented in the general fund, the street preservation, the solar weather camera, the drone, and the traffic counter, those take that adjusted available fund balance down to $1,115,756. With the $600,000 comfort level, still for council consideration within there, $515,756. Park Fund, available fund balance of $46,060. Again, still don't know because the senior tax credit's going to affect that, obviously to a much lesser extent, but it's going to affect that. Please don't touch the 46060, would be my recommendation. The enterprise fund, I've got to do new math based on the 1,272,719, but we would be asking that 109,446 be taken out of that. My comfort level within there is 750,000. That's always going to be a little bit higher because the big unknown in the enterprise fund is we have no idea if it's going to be a dry season, a wet season, how much water we're going to sell. We make a little bit off of water sales, obviously, same thing with sewer, but we just don't know out there. So I always like a little bit higher cushion in the enterprise fund for you all to be considering. That concludes this portion of the staff report.
413,253 is what you have left in the enterprise.
Thank you.
Yep.
After the 750.
After the 750.
So, if you have those numbers, why don't you go ahead and start plugging them in up there so we have the visual on those, Lisa?
Here, can I give her this since you're?
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Your Honor. There was one other item. I'd had some communication with the Chair of the Parks Board, Mr. Troutman. Apparently, they have a desire and a need to put, I think it's a boat ramp in at Hawk Ridge, and they have a grant, or MDNR has a grant for half of the money, but they think it's, if I remember right, the grant's 30,000, they'd have to have a 30,000 match to do that. Would allow them to stock the pond earlier and easier, as opposed to the way they do it now, and then staff could use it for general cleanup of the lake when we get trash that blow in there. So if the state is offering 30,000, I would hate to give that away. Now that communication's a little dated and it was email, so I don't have any details on it. Maybe you want to check it out with the park staff.
Let me bring that one forward with the cameras.
Oh,
After I've checked with them. My concern with it is, I know they're using, no, that's a land water conservation grant.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so this would be a different one. Okay, yeah, let me check with them, for sure.
Mr. Mills?
While we're on parks, I just have a general question on the budget. Do we budget money to spray our trails so there's not, like, there's companies out there that spray for, like, mosquitoes and stuff like that for the season? Do we have anything like that in our budget? Because I've had several comments, especially like, Linear Park and a lot of the trails over there that, because we'll have standing water at places and stuff that tends to be a lot more mosquitoes. So I didn't know if that was anything that we have in our budget or not.
We don't have it in the current budget. Let me look into that.
Okay.
We'd also have to check from a liability standpoint of spraying the trails, obviously, with any kind of an insecticide, but let me get some background information on that, yeah. Yeah, let me get some information on it for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the parks again, I think we discussed this the other day, but I was curious because I get a lot of calls. Two things. One, of course, our main traffic ways, Lucy Webb, is the main traffic way in the south side. And we talk about that just from a Silvertop going east over to Evanbrook right there. That stretch is, like we said, it's full of grass, got trees growing out of the street. People say, can't we just cut them down and it'll make them look a little better? It's a main traffic zone, as we talked the other day. I don't know if we can squeeze money in the parks, because I know they're really tight, because I know it's a tough job getting in there and try to spray it. Even if you spray it, it turns brown. At least if you cut all that down and spray it, at least it's a plus for the people. And then on the meadows, my wife asked me, when she's over there, of course, in the meadow side, you guys side, the trails. Are those belong to the meadows or to the city?
Those are not our trails.
Those
Good
are
Parkway
theirs?
Trails is ours, everybody else is theirs.
Okay, I want to make sure.
But
that sign's
they
up,
all,
that's why
we
I-
all suffer from the same thing with the trails, is the weeds growing up to them.
Yeah.
It is, the problem with it is an incredibly labor-intensive issue and maintenance issue to get in there.
Yeah.
You either have to, because especially on the trails, when you start, and you'll also notice it, and it's especially rampant at this time of the year, where asphalt bumps up against curb and the creases there, you see the stuff growing up out of there. Incredibly labor intensive to go in there because you almost have to burn them out. And last year, 2 years ago, in fact, that's what we ended, it was so bad on the trail between Lucy Webb and the roundabout at Rec Park. We actually went in there and did that, and it was 2 individuals, and of course, you're using a burner. It was 2 individuals, 2 days to get just that stretch cleared. But the private trails suffer from the exact same thing. They get those weeds growing up through it or on the side of them. On the roads, it is incredible. This goes all the way back to Mrs. Hubach. It was a real issue for her too, and we have looked short of, because especially in the curb line, we really hesitate putting any kind of weed killer, because you are saying you're putting weed killer down to go down into the streams and the lakes. Yeah. You're open, so the only thing you can do is burn it out.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jay.
Well, we're in a multi-year program to redo all the trails with concrete. I would assume that would have some impact on that problem.
Ours for sure.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, the city-owned ones, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then you're not trying to fight through, it's fight through
You
concrete.
don't have
is-
you don't have the same cracks.
Exactly,
that you do with the
yeah,
asphalt, for sure.
Mr. Burke.
The old practice of, like, in school districts, going around and burning all the weeds coming out of the playgrounds and the blacktop, and then you put some tar there, is the tar environmentally bad? Because we would do that in Independence every summer.
It's the same thing. It's basically crack sealer. Same thing that we use on the street, sir.
So that would be fine, though. Yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah, obviously, it's on the street.
Right.
No.
But as Councilmember Holman alluded to on the trails, with any luck, with any luck with the concrete, we're not going to have to do it anymore because the concrete doesn't crack like asphalt.
One more question, please. Councilman Holmes said, now, in the future, when they're going to concrete for the trails, could they budget in there over the long haul here, that strip of blacktop from Ward 1 there all the way up down there? It's all blacktop. Everything else is concrete. I didn't know in the future if we could tear that and put concrete in while we're doing these projects for the trails with concrete. And that's the only ones that's actually not concrete, they're blacktop, so.
Do you mean the Lucy? Which
Yeah, right
trails,
from
sir?
Silvertop on Lucy Webb going east, all the right side, the south side's all blacktop, goes up and down to Evanbrook. But the rest of that stuff on farther, and on the other side coming down to it, are concrete sidewalks.
That would be, I know what you're talking about. It would be street preservation.
Yeah.
Because that's a street trail.
Yeah, okay, great, we could get that, hopefully in future concrete, then we wouldn't have that problem.
But again,
Yeah.
we're
I know.
dealing with the challenges of the street
Well, I know, it's-
preservation
it's down
program
the
now.
road.
But yeah, down the road for
I'll
sure.
be out there in my little buggy, my weed cutter, and I'll be cutting them down for you.
I was actually, Councilmember Abdel Gawad will remember this. That we went through a whole period of what trails are better, concrete or asphalt, from the standpoint of the people who are using them. I have flipped around so many times on this, back and forth with it, and you can find 50% of the literature that's going to say one thing and 50% of the literature that's going to say the other when you're dealing with. I have reached the point that anything we can do to reduce maintenance on these things, I am all for it. Even with the concrete, I wish I could remember how long ago the ones went in that are pure concrete out on 150, but those are still looking very, very good, and that's been years and years and years ago. Some of them are still asphalt where it weaves, but those concrete trails have held up well with very little maintenance on them.
So with regard to the budget, 3 weeks ago it was presented to us by Mr. Fearborn. I didn't know if in that interim, through the studying process, if there were any portions of the budget as presented, if anybody had any questions. Mr. Mills?
I guess it's a question, but it's more of a proposal. From my communication with a lot of different people, one of the things that was in their mind a high priority, even with the use tax and stuff, was additional law enforcement. And I know the chief had asked for 3 officers, we've budgeted 1, that $90,000 level. I would like this council to consider, we just recently went through this reclassification study, and this year, I don't know if all of our employees did, but I know many of our employees saw an increase in their compensation. We're budgeting for the step increases so that it can continue to go forward. But I think I would like to see the council for this year, since we've already made some salary adjustments, not do the 2% across the board increase. That basically will free us up $150,000. We can at least hire 1 more police officer, maybe have that officer be able to help with, as an SRO officer too, because people feel like we need more than 1 SRO officer. And then that still leaves, $60,000 that maybe we can hire an additional public works, part-time parks person. I think it would go a long way to the community to say, listen, instead of saying, hey, we're not gonna do these things because you didn't pass the tax, we're making some cuts and sacrifices like everybody is in this economy, but our priority is making sure that we have the best law enforcement, we have the extra law enforcement, we've got the additional if we need. I don't know where we need that extra person the most, public works, parks, or whatever, but I would really like the council to consider that and for staff to consider looking at that recommendation.
We can certainly get the hard numbers that are associated with it, sir.
I think, Brian, so one of the difficulties is, having been in that industry for as long as I've been, once you give them something and it looks like they have a bright future ahead, you're probably gonna have a lesser problem with recruitment, but retention then becomes an issue because it doesn't look like you appreciate who is here by continuing the process of cost of living and such so that they stay up. So now you're gonna freeze them for a year, they get behind a little bit, and so what are we gonna do for them next year just to get 1 employee? I'd rather retain the quality people that we have as opposed to losing them and bringing on an additional, which might be difficult.
I disagree. I got a background in HR, and 80% of all people that leave a job, it's not due to the pay, it's due to other factors, their boss, the environment, things like that. Anybody that would say, I'm gonna get mad and leave over 2%, they're probably already a disgruntled employee. Again, there's a lot of people, our residents, a lot of them aren't getting cost of living raises. Not everybody out there. People are struggling. I think we just spent quite a bit of money this year getting people up into we put them at a
Competitive range. Yeah,
pretty
pretty
high
competitive.
competitive range compared to the size of our city, compared to some of the other cities. So I think we were very fair with them. We have a very good retirement package. We have a very good benefit package. And I think it would go a long way to show the citizens, that we were able to add 2 police officers instead of 1 police officer, because there's concern. We see the apartment complexes, we see more people moving in, we see things like that. And with all this stuff going on in the schools, and we only have 1 SRO officer, I just think it would be something that the public would be well received. And then if next year or whatever, we want to go back with the use tax again or something like that, I think we've showed the public that we were willing to do everything we could to get some of those key components, even though we didn't have all the resources we wanted, like with the use tax. I think it would go a long way with our community.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Burke?
My perspective from my career, in 2000, they came to us at the district, and it's a very similar pay structure. That's why I'm describing it, with the increases that happened along the way. And they came and told us in the middle of the first semester that our insurance was going to change in the middle of the school year. And as it turned out, my wife was pregnant with our first child. He's the one that's deployed right now. And we were told that if he was born in December, it would be covered. But if he was born in January, it was a pre-existing condition and it wouldn't be covered. And that's the kind of stuff that makes people leave. When you treat people poorly, like crap, I'm going to say, when you treat your workers like crap and they're just numbers and they're just some dollars on a page, they leave. Do you know how many hundreds of awesome teachers left Ray-Pac in the 26 years that I was there? People that I taught, people that I coached, people that I respect, people that left and took jobs with less work and made $8,000 more a year. And they still live in this community. You don't gain anything from ill will towards our employees.
Kevin?
Yeah, Mr. Mills, I think, the idea is not bad. I think the concept is what's bad, because basically the Raymore staff would be funding another staff. All the staff would be, on your plan, funding the staff, another staff member. Is that correct? Another police officer?
Well, we would not do that. We
So-
would keep the step increase and keep it not the 2%.
So they
across
would
the board.
technically, they would be giving up the 2.5% to get another police officer. Now, what do we say to the public works people that need more people? What do we say to the parks that need more
That's what I'm
people?
saying, we have another 60,000 there to be able to fund somebody in public works or parks too.
It costs, if they're, with benefits and all that, 60,000 doesn't go very far.
That's-
So,
This is just this is based on, with the benefits and everything, the police officer was $93,000.
excuse me,
so I'm taking
I
that
think
in.
I had the floor. I'm not debating you. I'm just saying that what it looks like is the city staff is giving up to fund more staff. I think that's what's, you made the comment that, well, the citizens of Raymore would like that. They may not, I don't know. I have not had any discussions with people that have an issue with our law enforcement. But I would say right now that I think if we did that to city staff, it would be basically a kick in the head, and we would cause a morale problem. Because then they're going to say, what else are we going to have to give up? 2.5% now? What's next? What's next? What's next? And we're doing it.
Sonia?
Thank you, sir. And I'll add to that. I don't know how much your human resources background you know about hiring police officers, but there's a huge shortage of police officers right now. And if we start treating them poorly and they start leaving, we're going to really, really struggle to fill those spots. I know many other cities here and across the country are really suffering as far as openings in their police departments, and I think that would be a very slippery slope to start down.
Again, I think we've showed the employees that we care about them with this salary study. I think several of them were treated, got some significant income raises. We've shortened down the steps. We've done a lot of things to do that. And so if it had been a year and a half, 2 years ago, we made those changes, I wouldn't even be bringing this up. But we've made some significant impacts. And I don't believe 1 year of 2% is gonna, nobody's saying that, trying to say we don't appreciate our employees. I think we showed we appreciate our employees by doing that, and I'm very insistent we keep the steps in, and that then we're looking forward to be able to do an increase in the future. I just think right now, I think we really need more than one police officer, and I believe this is a way that we can do that. And again,
I agree with you. I do believe
maybe
we need more,
provide
but I'm
some
not-
additional public.
Not sure that's the way to do it. Sonia?
And I'll just add, the other thing that was, I think, repeated over and over and over as we looked at that compensation study and we looked at that new pay chart was, if we don't keep up with this, we have wasted it all. We've wasted all that time, all that money in bringing it up to speed if we just ignore it year after year. And the city has been there in the past. We've been there in the past where we haven't given people those cost of living raises, and that's part of what got us into the position where we had to do a fairly large increase for some of our employees this year just to get them up into a market position where we can get quality employees and keep them here in Raymore.
Yeah, Don?
Thank you. I guess on this one here, the one thing I do want to bring up, because I did see some of these figures as far as mandatory overtime. And in the private sector where I'm at, I mean, this has happened before. This is real life when you're answering to a shareholder, which shareholders of Raymore, frankly, the citizens who own property, businesses who own property, those are your true shareholders who we really have to report to. I mean, that's who votes for us, and that's directly who we need to report to. But in the case of like mandatory overtime, we are affecting quality of life. And if we can't get relief to someone who's being forced to work overtime, the flip side of that, the pay is great, but your quality of life is affected by that. And we address that all the time. In the company I'm at, quality of life and safety are the two biggest things that we look at on a daily basis. How do we solve that? Is this a solution to add another police officer? It may or may not be, but you know, for the comments that it's a slap in the face, I think that, you know, we do have to find a way. I think, you know, to the drone program, because obviously I'm probably the biggest proponent of that, and I think it's the one department that maybe you said, maybe you didn't, is business development. That is the most effective use tax we can have. What was proposed last year is not nearly as strong as if we had businesses out here that people can buy things at, not Raymore residents, because the use tax directly affects only Raymore residents. It doesn't affect anyone else. That, you know, the drone program will bring businesses to Raymore. I'm 100% convinced that if we can use that to advertise, even planning and zoning meetings, all we get to see is 4 views from the street level. That doesn't give the perspective. You know, I have a view on my phone now of the Chick-fil-A project almost every like 5th day, because eventually it's going to be a motion photo of you know, what it was before to the end. But that's what people want to see. That's what developers want to see, is the entirety of the project. We have a meeting Wednesday night, a good neighbor meeting with the project down south. And you know, I have some drone photos just from my own public or personal, you know, view of what does that area look like, and the power lines that may be affected by parks and things that were brought up in the park meeting the other night. But I do think, you know, when it comes down to tough decisions, you know, this may or may not work. But we do need to look at things to, you know, just because the 2% may affect the current thing, we are affecting people currently, like who is getting the overtime. I assume the police department's the majority of the overtime.
I'll let Mr. Fearborn jump in on that.
Maybe I need to clarify mandatory. Mandatory overtime is different than overtime. Our police officers are not paid 2,080 hours. They're paid 2174. The difference between the 2080 and the 2174 is actually overtime that they have to have, that they work as part of their shift, because they're on a 12-hour shift.
shifts.
So mandatory overtime actually applies to that. And then some of the open positions that were listed are obviously police officer positions as well. That's what that overtime actually is. There's a completely separate number for overtime, sir. Just wanted to clarify that.
Is that overtime significant, though? Not, I get the 12 hours because that's a labor law issue there, but the other overtime, because we may not have enough police officers, is that significant to, I mean,
I couldn't answer that one here.
or maybe like Sonia, I mean, like, you know, your husband's on the staff. I mean, is that do we have to force police officers to work extra because we do not have enough?
I can't, I mean, he doesn't tell me about the operations in the police department,
That's
but
actually a
I can tell
staff
you for
question.
years, my husband has not been forced to work overtime.
Yeah, we can't force anybody to do that, but I could certainly give you some sort of an overtime figure when.
We always build in an overtime amount because things happen. Sick leave, vacation, it just happens. Mr. Holman? It's not forced overtime, correct. It's not mandatory.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would concur with your position and your comments, as well as that of Councilmember Barber, Councilmember Burke, and Councilmember Abdel Gawad. A couple of points for correction. Shareholders of Raymore would be all citizens, not just those that own property. People that rent and live here are citizens of Raymore and have the same rights as people who own property or businesses. And to your point, Mr. Mills, about the SRO, that is a position that would have to be approved by the school district. They pay for the salaries of those people, and that would have to come from their voting body, which is the school district, school board, I'm sorry.
Anything else?
We will definitely get clarification on the numbers, though, and bring those back in 2 weeks to you all, as far as what the actual costs are, the extra amount, what could be afforded with that, and give you the council that level of detail for those,
Okay.
for sure.
Sonia?
I just want to add one thing. So kind of talking about what we lost with the use tax not passing, a big part of that was care on our roads. We continue to see our streets and curbs deteriorate at quite a speedy rate. And so my proposal for any of the extra general fund would be to spend it on streets and curbs, that street program. I think we could bump that up quite a bit, almost that 500,000 to the level. And if we don't have to spend it all, we don't have to spend it all, but I would like to see it allocated there before I saw it allocated to any pet projects for council members. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Baker?
And that's kind of a good point there to segue into. So if we had something allotted from like the park department, could that money be used somewhere else? And what I'm going at is this dog park for $350,000. I love dogs. I have a dog. He's very popular in Ward 1, walking the trails every day with my wife. But when I look at that number, to me, I know we've wanted a dog park for a long time. Does it affect every citizen? It's a small percent that would use a dog park. People who own cats, birds, and all that, they can't take advantage of that. Do we have dog parks that are close to our community? Absolutely we do. The Grandview Park, 4.21 miles away from this proposed site. Belton's 3.46 miles away. Lee Summit, a little over 8 miles. I think, the reason I'm bringing this up is the streets are a big concern to me. I don't think we can afford to let everything other than 58 sit for 2 years. I think just driving around the city that I do, we have a lot of streets in bad repair right now, that if we were to wait 2 years, that's gonna back us up even further to where we may never catch up. But a project like this, it would be nice to have a dog park. I think that's one of these, it would be nice to say that Raymore had a dog park, but is this the right economic time to spend over a third of $1,000,000 on something that, we could wait a couple of years on this? Or, 3.7 something miles away from the proposed dog park is the Chewy.com warehouse headquarters. Have we approached them potentially on cost to, maybe they would want to sponsor the cost of this, or a naming rights to the dog park? Instead of it being the Raymore Dog Park, maybe the Chewy.com dog park in Raymore with a bunch of signage. I think going to corporate entities around us, not just Raymore companies like, that are down south in the warehouses by my house, but success of a community has to rely somewhat on corporate sponsorship. And if it means giving up like the naming rights to the Raymore Amphitheater to another business that may come in and say, I'll give you $100,000 and have my name on the front of it, that's what gets us more things without asking the taxpayers for more things. So I think we need to have some consideration on the CIC for the dog park, since that's slated for this year, that, could we use that money, or is there a way to allocate that money from that fund over into the 58 highway project or residential streets? Or, obviously curb and street repair, we hear it from everyone all the time, or everyone's got a curb that they don't like, or there's a pothole they don't like. And I think I read somewhere 370 lane miles of streets in Raymore, which obviously, 2-lane streets and all that, you don't have that many curbs, and hopefully curbs would last a little bit longer than the streets do. But, I do like the concept of putting some of the general fund into this. Now that we're past the landfill, I think we need to get aggressive on what is most important, and that would be getting the street preservation thing down. I also want to bring up the Edgewater third road repair, which is the second highest CIC.
Before we go beyond that, let's answer your question about the dog park.
The park sales tax can only be used for parks projects. So while it could be reallocated by the park board to a different parks project, it can't be used for a street, and vice versa. Transportation money can't be used on a parks project of that magnitude. Geo bond, it has the same separation that geo bond, that's the reason we have to go for a geo bond project for transportation or general if we're building a building in the future or a parks project. They have to be separated. So yeah, it could come out. Interestingly enough, we
Could
did
come
it.
out of that?
No, it could not, sorry. It could not, another project could come, another parks project could be reallocated. The money
Diverted
could be,
to it, yeah.
and that would be up to the park board to recommend to you all. The park board decides on their projects and what they're gonna use that money for, by both statute and the MOU. Where was I gonna go? Interestingly enough, we actually did approach Chewy. They dedicate their money, they're in Belton, they dedicate their money to Belton. It's been pretty minimal what Belton has been able to get out of them for projects. Same with Van Trust, when we asked them to sponsor some items, they did so willingly, but it's usually in the range, like on our $1 million playground at Hawk Ridge Park, they donated, I think, 30,000. It was unsolicited, but they donated about 30,000. That's usually the range you see from what I'll describe as the big boys in doing sponsorships like that.
Second half of your question.
Wasn't that property donated to the dog park Parkside?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, cool. The other thing, and I saw this on the planning and zoning commercial, the Edgewater repair, and obviously the photos, you look at that, that is a serious issue that needs to be taken care of. It's second highest single, I guess, CIC item other than street repair. But I guess with that, you look at the photos, and I know it was brought up in planning and zoning as far as the contractor who did that, I guess it passed inspection at the time it was done. We had a 2-year warranty on it. How long was that road? I mean, how long has that road been there? Or typically, I know there's underlying issues there.
Yeah, I was gonna say 6 years, but I'm a little high on that, yeah.
And is that, like, do we anticipate more in that area? I mean, is the picture the entirety of that 600,000 plus repair, or is there other parts of that area that
Within the,
potentially?
Come on up, use the microphone.
Mr. Barber, or Mr. Holman?
yeah.
I think there's like 8 different spots. It's more than just that one spot in the picture. There's a handful of areas out there, and we're going beyond the limits of just where the bad spot is to try and capture as much as possible. Part of that project will also be French drains to hopefully get the water away from the road and keep it from happening again.
Short form is we anticipate part of the road in the entire circle has the exact same problem. We could go in fact, the initial number that we had was significantly lower than that, but the repairs would be gone by the time we got to spring. And the entire circle is floating on a pond at this point, which is why the French drains are gonna be necessary. We went down how many inches before we got to basically water and vacuum?
So we had some geotech work done out there. They did borings 5 feet deep total, and I think in the 18 of the 22 holes they did, they found water within 3 feet. So
We share
It's
your
right
opinion, as you heard me say at Planning and Zoning, absolutely share the opinion that this is a ridiculous amount of money. We hope we can get out of there with less, but the fact of the matter is, if we don't do something, the worry is we lose the entire circle in a heartbeat because it's floating on water.
Some of
But-
those homes would be
But it
threatened
is,
as well.
and we've even talked about, they passed the roll, I've actually gone back and looked at all the testing that was done at the time. Passed the roll test, passed, we don't know if it was further construction that caused it. We do know that there are a number of underground springs throughout the Creekmore area. In fact, we proposed a couple of other repairs to you all for up in the furthest northeast corner from these springs. I don't know if it was construction that took place that rerouted water underneath this particular area after the fact. We hope it's an anomaly, but it could come up again because we don't know what the root cause of it is. But in the end, just doing the repairs, we're gonna be in that same situation where we're spending 40 to 60,000 every 6 to 8 months. Do we just go in and get it repaired once and for all?
I think as a homeowner, I would want it done right the first time and say I've got, and that's the expectation. That'd be mine if it was my cul-de-sac. I mean, let's just do it right. Let's spend the money and get it done. And I think we're on the right path for that. I think some of the conversation was going down in the, in the future, is there anything we can do to, like, maybe it's not the contractor's fault. Maybe they did all the testing and whatever, but you said the geotest finding water. Is that something that, we can look at or have, a warranty of 2 years seems a little short on road work. Maybe that's the norm for the industry, but, to me, that, I mean, if I spend, whatever we spend on that project and only get a 2-year warranty out of it, I would think that, maybe a sliding scale, maybe not all or nothing after 2 years, but I think it's, the people deserve to have that fixed because, I mean, someone's gonna, there's a big hole there, and I mean, I'm just afraid someone's gonna, not pay attention to what they're doing, drive in it, you get a cat or a dog fall in that hole. I mean, we didn't have the fire department out there for a rescue and that. So I just kind of curious about like going forward. We learn from what happens and what can we do better next time would be.
We're actually looking at the possibility of bringing in an outside firm before we do the acceptance to take a look, to do their own borings after the roll test, who basically, that's the only thing they do, similar to a Wilson or someone like that. So adding the extra step in there,
Is there a
that
cost?
there is, there'll be a cost.
Because that was my other point too, like for thoroughfare or maintenance of thoroughfare, 12,000 a year for admin and inspection. Is that, I take that, that's an outside cost.
That's ours. That's where we're actually out there on a day-to-day basis watching the project take place. We're there to watch the roll test, and they have to prove the roll test to us. They don't have to prove it to an outside firm. The point of the outside firm coming in would be an additional cost over and above the 12, but right into the contract, kind of give away this one, right into the contract that the standard in the industry is the 2-year, but if there is a failure within a 4-year, that they bear some of the cost of a repair. And basically, we put that into the RFQ and ultimately a contract that we would be writing with a firm like that, especially if we see this manifest itself in another location. But we're looking into all those possibilities. And you'll remember, we actually even brought, this is such a significant item in it, we brought big old asphalt wheels into you all because we're trying to figure out what's going on with this deal.
If you went with an outside inspector, they'd also have professional liability that would be able to come back on if, they had said, yeah, this is a good road, and ended up not being a good road, you'd also have another area to maybe recoup costs from.
Another thing that can happen, and sometimes the road is installed and there isn't a groundwater issue, and they dig a basement and they hit a spring then that creates an issue. But if it takes 2 years to build the house, there's a lot of unforeseen groundwater that we can't account for sometimes. So it very likely couldn't have been a water issue out there in 2019, but then it came up later on. So that's another thing.
Good point. Yeah. So Sonia, would you be comfortable with just leaving that where it's at under the available after comfort? And then if there are things that staff feels like they need to come back for us because there are additional things, then we could authorize that for a budget amendment.
I was
That's a
just
great
suggesting
suggestion.
that anything left over, we put towards streets because I think it's
If you recall, I
needed.
suggested that a couple of years ago too, so I think it's a great suggestion, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But with that, also minimizing maybe the council's creativity at bringing some projects forward if we don't really have anything that legitimately is more valuable than keeping up our streets.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to?
suggest?
I would be asking the council for your indulgence to meet on September 30th on the fifth Monday. We have a fairly significant item, and again, that allows for even more budget discussion. Hopefully, some of the questions that have been asked here tonight, staff can get data on. But as you know, and I can talk about the topic just very briefly right now, the topic is going to be to discuss data centers with the council. As you know, there has been a significant issue within the county concerning data centers. Staff has been doing a lot of research. Actually, our staff, when that issue started to become an issue in a neighboring municipality, we were the first ones approached because they had a problem and they were looking to us for a solution. When that came up, which is now more than a half a year now, staff began our own researches on these things because obviously they're becoming very prominent across the United States. And so we will be bringing the results of that research along. We've done site visits, we've done a lot. So we'll be bringing that to you with information for you all and preliminary recommendations for you all. And we will be doing all of that on September 30th with your indulgence. And I think I see everybody kind of nodding, so
Okay.
we'll be scheduling that one for you all.
All right, it's my wedding anniversary, but okay. No, I know. Oh, Vicky would love it, wouldn't she? Yeah.
These have been described as a vacation.
Oh, I like it. All right. Here's your dinner, dear. All right, well, I think we've got a lot accomplished here this evening, a lot of information and suggestions made, so do a little research as well. So if there's nothing else from anybody, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.